Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros MLB. This is the Fantasy Baseball Podcast. That's right, we're back, baby, in the offseason. It's me, Joey P. Joe Pisapia. With me, of course, is my boy, the Welsh. And today we're going to take a look at Dynasty rankings. Where is the top 100 right now? Who's rising? Who's falling? A hard look at the top 12, too, and the assets that you need, because we know this is the time of year where a lot of Dynasty startups are beginning. And, of course, a lot of Dynasty team evaluations are happening. So the Welsh and I are going to do a deep dive on that top 100 players, give you some takes of some guys that we think are noteworthy. And Welsh, I know we're in the thick already of preparing for the 2026 MLB season. Make sure everybody should subscribe here to the Fantasy Pros MLB YouTube channel, and of course, wherever you get your podcast, to the podcast feed as well. I'm writing Black Book, you're writing Black Book. That should be out December 15th on the Amazon, so that's a nice Christmas/holiday present to everyone who loves baseball out there. And I'm writing up the pitchers, you're writing up all the prospects, and this is prospect season, right? You're out there in the AFL, you're seeing some of these guys too that we're going to talk about today. So this is a great opportunity to kind of take a step back and kind of look at the big picture when it comes to Dynasty leagues.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because, you know, when you're looking at like whether it's a startup or, you know, you've got a long-term one, a lot of like the redraft to maybe even top 100, the things that are close. The biggest, most dramatic differences are usually have to do with age, and it has to do with like a super young player or a super old player. So us doing this kind of risers, fallers, or the dynasty adjustments are going to be, where do some of these incredibly, amazingly talented players that are older end up going on the ranks? Where do some of these young guys who just had big performances, how far can they jump? How far can Junior Caminero or Nick Kurtz jump? And then I think probably the most difficult thing for people in Dynasty, and we're going to hit a couple of these, where do some of the top prospects in baseball rank here? Kevin McGonigal, who's out here in the AFL that I'm seeing, he's a guy that's close. Where does he fall in? Or how about Konnor Griffin, who I think is kind of not universally, but seen as like the top prospect? Where does he fall into this valuation when he hasn't played a game and he's still really far away? So those are the things that we're going to be talking about in this. And you're going to be able to see an updated Dynasty ranks right around when this show airs over on Fantasy Pros. If you guys want to go and check out, you can find my Fantasy Baseball Dynasty ranks. It should be, I usually do a top 100 or top 150 on Fantasy Pros, so be on the lookout for that. And this is a lot of what we're going to be referencing in this episode. Yeah,
great stuff, Welsh. And of course, if you're playing in Dynasty, you got to go get Welsh's 100 prospects ranking in the Black Book. It is invaluable to all of that evaluation process, even keeper leagues too. I mean, this is kind of that same notion too when you're looking for a couple years here moving ahead. All right, let's take a look at the leaderboard here, the top 12. Shohei Ohtani at the top, no surprise there. Obviously coming off one of the greatest postseason single performances in the history of baseball or any sport, striking out 10 guys, hitting 3 home runs. Unbelievable performance for him. Bobby Witt comes in at number 2 here on Welsh's list. Then Corbin Carroll at 3 with Juan Soto at 4. Now, look, I understand, you know, the love for Corbin Carroll. He steals bases, he hits home runs, but so does Juan Soto. And with only a couple years really ahead of him in terms of age, Juan Soto coming off back-to-back 4,100 seasons, a year where he just stole 38 bases. I know it's an outlier in his career, but physically speaking too, I just feel like physically, Juan Soto would hold up better over the next couple of years than maybe a Corbin Carroll would, just physically. Coming up next at number 5, Elly De La Cruz on Welsh's list, then Ronald Acuna. Ronald Acuna coming off that knee surgery, obviously some good and bad last year. He did have that one really hot streak upon his return. But going forward, I mean, do you see, I guess, projectability that Ronald Acuna, who's still, you know, in that 27, 28 range, overtaking Elly in this, who is kind of coming off a slightly disappointing year based upon expectations?
I do think it's a possibility. Like, so when I look at this real quick, I'm not going to argue with you on the Juan Soto thing, because I think Juan Soto deservedly could be 2, but I think it's a core 4. I think the top 4 is the core, whatever order you want. I think Ohtani kind of, he's cemented at 1.
Well, yeah, but if he's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4,
and 3, yeah,
and
exactly.
then it's everybody else in baseball, yeah, pretty much.
But if you want to have Soto at 2, I think it's justifiable. If you believe the stolen bases are going to continue, Carroll's a little bit younger, you know, Witt's a monster, like that's the course. So then things start to open up a little bit, and then there's some interpretation. I agree. Elly did have kind of an underwhelming season after being such a dominant base stealer. The problem for me with a guy like Acuna, as his age comes up a little bit, is there are perpetual injuries. The stolen bases kind of going away. So I think he just belongs in this discussion. I'm not going to argue if you thought Acuna was going to end up being better. That's not a big argument here, but I think these guys are close. And I think the next couple players create this Again, Ohtani's kind of his own tier. Then I think it's like Whit, Carroll, Soto. And then I think there's this tier that opens up of another like 4 or 5 players. So I'm not in big arguments, but like Acuna's got some stuff that makes me worry a little bit.
Well, I understand. I mean, double knee surgery, torn ACLs can make you worry if the stolen bases ever come back or not. Let's hope that they do. But again, if he was in his 30s, I'm with you, but he's still in, the late 20s there. Julio Rodriguez, the epic slow starter, coming in at number 7, Jackson Chourio at number 8, and then Junior Caminero, followed by Fernando Tatis at 10, Paul Skeens at 11, the only pitcher in the top 12, and Nick Kurtz at 12. I love seeing this, Welsh, because I have got Kurtz, Tatis, Caminero, Ronald Acuna, and that is all part of one squad here with Ellie De La Cruz that I have in my home league, in my home keeper league. So I've acquired those guys over the years. So the fact that I've got 5 of the top 12 on your list makes me feel really great. And Junior Caminero is the guy I want to highlight first here. 45 homers, 110 RBI, 7 stolen bases last year. He had 264 with an OPS of 846. He also scored 93 runs last year. It's funny. I remember mid-season I was talking about Caminero. I was like, well, we think he can finish kind of like in that Machado-ish range. Well, he blew those expectations out of the water, and he was just unbelievable. Junior Caminero, in terms of age, in terms of everything lining up here, position, looks like he is going to be one of these guys from years to come. I could even argue, to be honest with you, Welsh, that in some ways he might be a safer version of an investment than maybe an Acuna or even an Ellie De La Cruz, potentially, based on what you saw last season. But let's talk about what your thoughts are on Caminero as he breaks the top 10 on your list.
Yeah, that's why it's kind of like it's open tier. And again, remember, I put those 2 guys in that tier. So if you wanted to have Caminero there, what Caminero first has is age. He has age over all of these guys. I think this is the youngest player inside the top 12 or probably inside the top 25 that I have in Dynasty. The thing that is like the slight negate is you look in a lot of these guys, what's the common denominator? There's a lot of stolen bases. He does not have the stolen bases, but what he proved to be was an absolutely elite power hitter. 45 homers as a 22-year-old. You love the batting average to be a little bit up, but he lowered his K percentage to under 20%. He had a 51% hard hit rate this year. He, I believe, had number 1 or number 2 in bat speed. And that is something to me, with that type of bat speed and low K rate, that's kind of like a floor to a player that looks like he's going to hit at the low, maybe 35 homers in a season. The expected home runs on Baseball Savant had him down at 39. Still, this is an elite power hitter who has years and years to come. And if there was like a K rate issue, I might care more about the batting average and stuff. It's not. So you just had to come to terms with he's a top 10 fantasy guy. If you want elite power, it might be justifiable to make him a top 5. He might be at 5, but he's in this general range. I got him in as a top 10 here. And Junior Caminero stands out as somebody that there might be a difficulty in translating redraft to Dynasty, that it's like, yes, you do want him over Aaron Judge. Yes, you do want him over Jose Ramirez, because he's got 10 to 11 years of extra time in front of him. So Caminero absolutely balled out this year, and he's a top 10 Dynasty player.
Now, Nick Kurtz, I don't know if that name surprises some people that he made the top 12. It doesn't surprise me. An incredible April in AAA there, where he hit 321 with a 1040 OPS, 7 homers and 24 RBI. Came up to the big leagues. He did miss a little bit of time there at one point, but still, over 117 games, 36 homers, 86 ribbies. He had an OPS over 1,000. He hit 290 with a 383 on base percentage, a 619 slugging. The guy was absolutely spectacular. That ballpark certainly helps too. They're going to be playing there for the foreseeable future. So I guess that's the only thing you can say, long term. Okay, what does the eventual landing spot of home ballpark effect look like? But you know what? I really don't care. For the next couple of years, Nick Kurtz looks like the real deal. And this is one of the many, many meteoric rises of that 2024 draft class that we've talked about being the best since maybe even the 1986 draft class, right? We're talking about like some great draft classes historically. This looks like one of the great rookie classes we've ever seen.
Yeah, and I did struggle with him just a tiny bit, because I had this debate like the second half of the season of like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. versus Nick Kurtz. There's kind of that debate. And then also, like, I feel the confidence level in Junior Caminero in the top 10 being over those guys I mentioned, like Jose Ramirez and Aaron Judge, I'm super confident with. Nick Kurtz, I want to feel confident with, but the one thing that stands out, unlike Junior Caminero, really high K percentage, almost 31% K percentage, but everything else was elite. It's like bat speed, barrel, 18% barrel, 51% hard hit rate. It's a really good ballpark. The guy pulls the ball in the air. Like, he does everything that you want, and he hit for way better batting average. But he had an expected batting average around 255. So there's a little bit of a concern if that starts to creep in. Maybe he doesn't have the floor, especially if you're in a win now mode and you're passing up Aaron Judge and Jose Ramirez, who you could still probably get 3, 4, maybe even 5 really good years of production out of. It's just Nick Kurtz is a 22-year-old, and if the things continue in this rate, this is a 35 to 45 home run hitter with really good average, and this is why he's being evaluated in this range. But it makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable based on like him over Kyle Tucker, over Vlad, over Jose Ramirez. But, this is the dynasty thing. You follow a player that can carry your team for many, many years to come. And I don't really remember a year where you had like 2 players not in this range just vault into the top 12 in Nick Kurtz and Junior Caminero.
I think they're very deserving. Real quick, before we move on to the next grouping, I want to touch base on Fernando Tatis for a second. A player who, hasn't driven in 90 runs since 2021. Obviously, where he hits in the batting order has something to do with that too at times, but he did have a career high in stolen bases last year with 32. But he is a player that can carry your fantasy team for a couple weeks at a time, and then other times kind of drag it down. Does anything about the flux of players like him or Julio Rodriguez enter into your sphere when you're looking at this top 12 evaluation overall too? Because they can be very streaky players, both Tatis and even Julio to a certain degree. We know the talent, we know the power, speed, but I mean, just for context too, Tatis is 26 years old, same age as Juan Soto.
Yeah, it 100% does, but it's mixed between, and this is where age gives a little bit of a boost here. It's mixed between these players that are like 30 years old or 32 years old. It's like, yes, Tatis has got some diciness. He has a really still great profile. He lowered his K percentage to the lowest of his career, 18.7, while walking more than ever. That got him into like the mid 20s in homers, over 30 stolen bases. They have kind of a new regime change coming in, but he is streaky. But that is versus like a 26-year-old or going for a player that's 8 years older or 6 years older. So I do think there's the streak that's the question, but the age was an extra vault over guys like Kyle Tucker, or again, coming back to Aaron Judge, just because it's like you still might have 8 to 9 years of really good production versus some of the players that they're based around. But he is riskier. I prefer Julio over him, but we are starting into a risky range. And then just to throw this in, like if you play in a league that's a little bit more formatted to pitching, like Paul Skeens would move up and Tariq Skubal would move up. I guess you could, I would be scared to make an investment in a starting pitcher with Tommy John's, how they are inside the top 10, but I could see people passing on a guy like Tatis because of some of the volatility for a player like Paul Skeens or even Tariq Skubal.
All right, the next grouping here, starting at number 13 overall, Kyle Tucker, followed by Gunnar Henderson, then Aaron Judge at 15. I understand the age of Judge too and some of the physical ailments he's had, but obviously if you want to put Aaron Judge, everyone in your top 10, it's hard to argue against it. Tariq Skubal at 16. We'll see what this offseason brings in terms of potential trades. We know that the Tigers right now are kicking the tires on a few of those deals. Not sure if they are going to be able to sign Skubal to a long-term contract. Jose Ramirez at 17 and Roman Anthony at 18. Let's stop there and take a pause. Roman Anthony obviously was the number 1 prospect in baseball, and we had to wait a little bit for him to get going. June was kind of rough there for him, just 1 homer. He had 210. Then the batting average came around in July. He had 329, but again, only 1 home run. August, on the other hand, things really took form. He had 304 and 6 homers, drove in 13, stole 2 bases at a 909 OPS. So things really started to tick up for Roman Anthony eventually, and we saw nothing. Then we saw the batting average, then we saw the power in the batting average, and it's safe to say that going forward, not only is it a great ballpark, great situation for Roman Anthony, but this is a player that the Red Sox plan to build their franchise around, and one that you could probably build your fantasy franchise around for the next 5 to 10 years. Yeah,
and I think he is the first. If I look at the top 25 of who we're talking with here, he's the only one that I think has the not stats pushing him up that could make some question marks. I think he might be the questionable one for people because, he ended up only having 8 homers, 4 stolen bases, relatively half of a season's production. So if you like to extrapolate, you would look and you'd be like, okay, well, he might be a 16, maybe 18 homer guy. Maybe he's 10 stolen bases. That's not a top 2 round player. But the profile to me is what stands out. And he just started to get going. He had a 60% hard hit rate, which is ridiculous. Doesn't qualify. A lot of his metrics, like they didn't qualify because of at bats. He doesn't chase. Yes, he had a high K percentage at 27%, but he doesn't chase. Crazy hard hit percentage. Walk rate was good. Great hard hit numbers. His average EV was 94.5, but also they immediately thrust him into the top of the lineup, whether he's leading off, hitting 2, 3. And I think he is the unrealized dynasty asset right now that I want to buy into. That's why I have him as a top 20 guy. I think he's like, he's the counting stat list Nick Kurtz. I would not be shocked next year if he is 30 plus homers, 10 plus stolen bases, tons of runs and RBI. So this is the guy that of all this list in the top, I mean, there's a couple of guys you could say like they underperformed. I know we'll talk about James Wood, but like he doesn't have the stats behind him to justify that. But go to age, 21 years old. I forgot, top 25. He's the youngest player, even younger than Junior Caminero. This will be the breakout year coming up for him. So I firmly believe he is a top 20 dynasty player.
And he's a lefty that can hit lefties too. 278 batting average against left-handed pitching last year at the big league level. That's important, because a lot of young left-handed bats can struggle sometimes, and sometimes they never find their footing with left-handed pitching at the big leagues. At 19, Vlad Guerrero Jr., then we come into Garrett Crochet at 20. That's the top 20 there. 21, Yordan Alvarez, followed by Pete Crow Armstrong. Let's hit another pause button here on Pete Crow because first half was spectacular. Let's make no bones about it. He might have won you your league in the first half. I mean, the guy was absolutely brilliant. 25 homers, 27 steals before the break. After the break was a different story. He had just 6 homers, 24 RBI, only 8 steals. The batting average dropped off from 265 to 216. The OBP dropped from 300 to 262. And then the slugging went from 544 to 372. Also, you talked about guys before we were discussing about the players who struggled to hit left-handed pitching. Well, that was my whole thing at the All-Star break of when we did shows on leading off talking about, you should investigate maybe seeing what you can get for Pete Crow Armstrong in season-long roto because you've gotten so much already. Maybe somebody overpays. And if you made that trade and you got something pretty good back, if you got a Tatis back or something like that, look, versus left-handed pitching last year, a .188 batting average, a .594 OPS. To me, he is a player that still has a lot of question marks despite a glorious first half. The league found him out. They exposed him a little bit, especially left-handed pitching really did. So how does that equate here on your list based upon guys like, I know Devers is yet to come, and even Cal Raleigh coming off a 60-homer season as a catcher?
He is. I'm going to tell you this. I might have him too low. I might have him too high with Pete Crow Armstrong. He is an enigma. Actually, I would say him and James Wood, I think, are the two most difficult players in this range. Both huge counting stat, talented players, both ages on their side. But, just on James Wood for a second, he ended up absolutely just becoming a strikeout monster. That might be way too high of where I have him, but just loud homers, loud stolen bases, also can hit both sides of the plate that I can feel that can change. Pete Crow is so much more difficult, actually. I could easily just be like, you know what? Let's just put James Wood down in the bottom 40 or 50 because he strikes out a whole lot. Pete Crow, it's like, it was an ungodly first half. Absolutely ridiculous. Expected slug was right around 500. He barreled the ball up, which you love to see. Hit the ball way harder than he's ever done before. And he's not a big strikeout necessarily monster. But as you said, absolutely fell off in the second half. Cannot hit lefties. Mm-hmm. Which version of this are we going to see? I don't know, but he's 23 years old. He fell just short of 100 runs, 31 homers, 35 stolen bases. There's a lot more to come, but yes, there's a big major question of like, if he's because what did he hit? He had 247. His expected batting average is actually better, by the way. If he's a 240, 50 hitter, can he be a top 20 guy? I don't know. But if he can be more of that version that he was in the first half and he can be a 260, 270 guy, we know he's going to be a 30 plus player. So, the 30 guys tend to be guys that are in the first round. There are so many question marks with Pete Crow. So this is just kind of like, there's a little bit of a hands up. Like, I don't know. He's super young. Mm-hmm. He put up monster stats, but there are a couple major red flags. So this is where, whether it's evaluations of trading, if you're risk averse, he might be a player you want to trade out of. If you're in a new redraft or a new dynasty draft coming up, if you're risk adverse, you might want to let somebody else take him. And there are, older-ish players that are falling a little bit that you can take. Much safer. Rafael Devers, you mentioned, just much safer player now, and I've got him at 25. So I'm very torn on where I'm at with Pete Crow Armstrong. That's a big way to say it. I've either got him way too high or I've got him way too low.
I will say this. I will bank my money here on too high, and it's because of the exposure in the second half. The league made adjustments to him, and he really didn't adjust back. And it's not the first time we've seen this too, right? If you go back 2 years ago, he struggled mightily in the beginning, and then he made a couple adjustments and things did go better for him. And then it carried over, and that's why his ADP was so low last year and he was such a league winner. I would rather in a dynasty league take a guy that hasn't gotten exposed yet. I know this might sound crazy, but the guy we're going to talk about next, a guy like Konnor Griffin, I'd rather be earlier on Konnor Griffin than too early on Pete Crow Armstrong as a player who may have already flashed the best he could possibly give us and might not be able to ever hold back to that first half standard. I think that's a real possibility with Pete Crow. I don't disagree with that. The thing I would also say is, like, I do think in-season adjustments can be really hard for some players. Some players do it really well, some don't. So something to watch again would be, can Pete Crow adjust in this offseason into the next half? And can those adjustments be to the level where the league isn't going to readjust again? And that's what I think is interesting about him, because it's like, he hit the ball harder. He barreled up the ball more. He had a 20-degree launch angle. He's pulling the ball, 30% pulled air percentage, dramatically different. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't have a big strikeout problem. So can the adjustments that he makes in the offseason be ones that are sticky enough that the league isn't going to then readjust and he completely falls apart? I don't know. That's why it's kind of hands up with Pete Crow. You've got to take your stance. You got to be like, hey, listen, if he does readjust, this could be a 40-40 guy. I love what he did in the first half. He's a monster. Or you got to be like, it is way too risky. I'll let anybody else do it. It's just, he's a super young guy. And that's what Dynasty's built around. I think that the other side of that coin would be potentially the empty batting average 25-20 guy. Like where you just like, well, and you can find that. You can find that in a lot of spots. Those guys do pop up.
Dude, Trevor Story was outside the top 200 and he's older and he was a 20-20 guy. So yeah, I definitely don't disagree.
He also has a
that.
career 208 batting average against lefties too. So this is nothing new. He really hasn't made the adjustment yet at the big league level. And the minor leagues too. That was one of the knocks on him. He was in the Met system too. And let's move on to Konnor Griffin, who's coming in at 34 on our list here. Obviously a terrific minor league debut for him. Over high A and double A combined 122 games. He had 21 homers, drove in 94 runs, stole 65 bases. Welsh hit 333 with a 941 OPS. Just stunning numbers. My guess is that he'll start the year again in double A for April because it's the Pirates and they're going to slow play everybody because it's the Pirates and there's labor issues looming in 2027 potentially for MLB. So I think it'll be a slow burn. I don't know when we're going to see him, but I do think he restarts again in double A. Do you think he goes right to triple A out of the gate?
No, I don't think so. I mean, he's a 19-year-old kid, and we're now moving out of this area where we're giving you like the top 25 numerically, and we're kind of going in these blocks and tiers. And this tier of this 26 through 50 range, where we're going to talk about a couple players, Konnor Griffin was the number one standout that we had to talk about because, like I said before, I think he is one of the most difficult players for people to understand the ranking evaluation because, like we said, Kevin McGonigal could come out the gates and break camp with the team. They almost brought him up this year. Konnor Griffin is not. He's going to go back to double A. That would be, again, that's my assumption. He moves 3 levels this past year. He had 21 games at double A. So that to me screams he goes back to double A, plays a decent amount of the season, goes to triple A. Could there be a call up? Yes. No idea how teams are going to treat the pending strike that's going to happen, the looming strike. Are they going to be more aggressive in bringing players up, knowing that they're not going to relent and they're going to buy down time? I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. So I don't know how aggressive, but we do know the Pirates don't win games and they're not hyper aggressive with prospects in general. This would be a guy that you want. So all of that aside here, taking that out, the reason that Konnor Griffin goes so high when he could have 0 production for you this coming year is because he's an absolute freak. 21 homers, 65 stolen bases. He had a 3.46, I believe, slash, 333 with a 415 OBP. The stolen bases are ridiculous. Already back working. To me, it isn't discussion between him and McGonigal as the number one prospect. It is Konnor Griffin by a country mile. He's a big dude. I was hoping we'd see him here in the fall league. And even though the team context, you can maybe argue about like hitting prospects with the Pirates, I think he's like a unicorn type of prospect. So because of the age, because he could be a guy at 20 years old in the majors, he could easily be the next Roman Anthony with bigger, louder stats here. And unlike the guys that we put at the top that are super young, like Nick Kurtz and Junior Caminero, there's stolen base potential through the wazoo here. So I think he is special. There's not strikeout problems. He kind of does everything. He's the epitome of a 5-tool player. You could argue that this is too low. If you were a team that is rebuilding, I would view Konnor, and you're in an already established dynasty, I would view Konnor Griffin as a top 20 player. If you are starting up a new dynasty, sometimes you take stances. If you're a team that's like, you know what, because I always suggest maybe go like win now. But if you're a team that's like, I want to be youth or I'm going to play for the next year, that's what people do. Konnor Griffin should be ranked higher. He should go in the top 20. That would be the evaluation of him. But I've got him, as you said, on this 26 through 50 board. He is 34th on my dynasty ranks.
All right, on 39, we have Kyle Schwarber coming off a huge season, obviously, 56 home runs. Since coming to Philadelphia, he has hit 38 or more home runs in every season. He has driven in 94 or more runs in every season. The batting average is always going to be in the 230-ish, 240 range. We know that. We know who he is. And he is going to be 33 years old. So obviously coming off a massive season for Kyle Schwarber. But in Dynasty, a player who is now on the other side of 30. So do you think, I guess here's the question is like, do you feel comfortable here with this ranking that you've got him in?
Yeah. So so like how difficult Konnor Griffin is? Kyle Schwarber's is difficult because of everything you said. Also, like he's probably going to be like util only, and he's 32 years old, and all of this stuff that's out there. Also, where he's going to play is kind of looming. The problem is he just hit 56 homers. He also stole 10 bases. He hit 240, and he's going to DH, and he could do that for quite a long period of time. I have a valuation of my ranks of like 3-year windows, roughly. So if I think a player can still produce at a really high level for 3 more years, regardless of their age, I'm probably going to rank them relatively high. I mean, still have Judge is like, like a top 15 guy. Schwarber's kind of the same thing. I think he's kind of under heralded. He easily could have 4 to 5 more very, very productive years, and he's getting better. He's aging like fine wine. So it does make me feel uncomfortable because of the position stuff. But again, at 32 years old, he just hit 56 homers and stole 10 bases. So I think the floor is something like a 240 hitter with 40 homers on a year in and year out basis. So that's why he's got to be ranked this high. And I'll throw this out to you. Maybe not from a batting average standpoint, but players like Kyle Schwarber who fall in dynasty ranks, Freddie Freeman is going to fall. Those are the type of players that allow you the ability to take shots on guys like Pete Crow. If you want to take that shot on Pete Crow, knowing you could get I know we're not talking about him, but a Freddie Freeman 3-4 rounds later that can protect the batting average and give you 3 or 4 more years. That's why you can do some of these things. And Kyle Schwarber is kind of one of those players as well, except you can't do Schwarber and Ohtani though. That's the little caveat.
I'm more comfortable to take Schwarber than I am Freddie Freeman at this stage too. Just, I think Freddie Freeman's body's breaking down on him. It seems like the last couple of years, whereas Schwarber, because he doesn't play the field, I think he might last a little longer. I think that, util is a negative in some ways, because it kind of prohibits you a little bit in terms of flexibility. But we saw with David Ortiz, right? He played well into his late 30s and was extremely productive. So I'm like, well,
everyone waited for the falling knife with him, and it never happened.
Right, it never came. Like, it just never came. Even Nelson Cruz, there were some years too, where like, is this it? Is this it? And it just kept going. Kevin McGonigal, the next guy on this list at number 40, is worth talking about too. This is another big riser in the Detroit system, a guy between single A, high A, and double A last year. A combined 88 games for him, 19 homers, 80 RBI, that coveted 345 slash, hit 300, had a 400 on base percentage and a 583 slugging, and a 991 OPS. Now, he did steal 10 bases, but he did get caught 7 times, so you don't love that. Maybe the stolen base skills need a little bit more work. But McGonigal, a guy in prospect circles, even in the Arizona Fall League, having a good fall league right now, is getting a lot of buzz.
Yeah, and he's out here. I've seen him quite a few times. McGonigal's interesting in the real prospect world. I think it's a discussion between McGonigal and Griffin. I don't really think it is in fantasy. I will say I'm not seeing a lot of the power approach out here in the AFL. I'd acknowledge it's been a long year. He had a home run robbed just the other day by Enrique Bradfield. I think McGonigal is going to be a heavy doubles hitter. I think he's a quintessential number 2 hitter. I think he could steal quite a bit more. At the end of the day, I do think he might be capped around being like a 2020 guy. But the thing is it could come with a really good batting average. He's got a solid approach. He's getting attacked a little bit out here as he's still a younger prospect. He's getting attacked out here by some more advanced pitching. like relief wise that I think is actually going to help him long term, but it looks like he could come up pretty soon. I've got him at 40, so I've got Griffin ahead of him. You have a little bit of proximity in his favor, but I think at the end of the day, you're going to see higher homers, probably even runs and stolen bases from a guy like Konnor Griffin. McGonigal, pending where he ends up being in the lineup, is going to be a high batting average guy. I think is going to be close to 2020s, but I don't want to discount that he could be a little bit more, but that's the valuation of the top 2 prospects in Dynasty. It's right around the top 40 overall players.
Zach Neto at 44 is interesting, Welsh, because as a shortstop, back-to-back 20 home run seasons, he had 26 last year. He only played 128 games as well. Now, the OBP is always going to be a little underwhelming. He did raise the batting average, though, from 249 to 257 year over year. The OPS went up as well. And Neto, I think people forget, is only 25 years old.
Yeah, and I think I actually might not be the highest ranker on him. I think there's some people that got him inside the top 25. There's a little bit of missed time that comes into effect on like how big the counting stats can be, but he had 26 season, 26 homers, 26 stolen bases, 82 runs, a 257 batting average that was supported by an expected batting average that was higher. He had a better hard hit rate this past year. Average exit velocity went up over 2 miles per hour, and he barreled the ball a whole bunch. So like kind of a monster. You just wish he hit for a higher batting average, but in a full season with a little bit more like, positive production, he's an easy 30-30 guy. And again, what did we say? 30-30 guys tend to be the players in the first round. He's only 24 years old. Hopefully the injury stuff goes away, and hopefully the Angels at some point bring some other players around them, which they never do. But, Neto's hitting profile, he's an offensive first, high profile, pull the ball, hit the ball relatively hard, and steal base type of guy. This is what you want. This is like, like Jazz Chisholm gets really pushed up in a lot of like dynasty circles, like into like the top 25. Like Neto's in that same range. I might have him a little bit lower than I should. Zach Neto at 44. I think he could easily be inside the top 25.
All right, let's move on to the next grouping of players here on this list, because we have from 51 to 75, a couple players we like to highlight, 3 pitchers specifically. At 54, Brian Wu. At 55, Jacob Mizorowski. And at 74, Bubba Chandler, the one that everybody was waiting on, and eventually we did get. I want to start with Brian Wu, because last year in the Black Book, this was one of my, all right, if he could just hold on to everything that he did well in 2024, increase that strikeout rate a little bit, he's going to be unbelievable. And he was a quality start machine last year, 21, tied for second in the major leagues, 25 consecutive starts of at least 6 innings pitched with 2 or fewer walks. That is the secret sauce. The xERA was 3.10, the FIP was 3.47, the xFIP was 3.33, the ERA was 2.94. Everything you could have asked for, he gave you. I know unfortunately the postseason didn't go his way so far in terms of how you like to perform, but overall, I mean, this is a guy that has made a huge leap, and I think that is, the building blocks here of the Seattle Mariners is the pitching staff, right? This is what they built on, the Kirbys, the Gilberts, and the Woos. And Wu, to me, I think doesn't get enough credit for how good he was last year and how consistent he was last year.
Yeah, and this is open to like this could even be lower than some people want. Dynasty ranks are always kind of difficult with pitchers and how your evaluation is, but at the end of the day, like he made massive improvements. His walk rate's super low. He struck out a ton more. His expected ERA was 3.11, right around his 2.94 ERA. So I mean, you love all of that. Like his stuff just got better. It's a phenomenal pitching environment. And, he kind of thrust himself into being like the most fantasy relevant pitcher of all these guys. I like Kirby, but I think, Wu is past Kirby. I think Gilbert's still at the top of this list. But I think at the end of the day, like it is obviously an advantage to spend on a guy like Skubal or Skeens or Crochet. I'd put them in like a little bucket. But, if you can get people that don't have an evaluation of a top 50 on Brian Wu, that's, I think, what's really interesting about him is I don't think he has the stigma of a top 50 player, but I think he has the production. So I've got him right outside of it at 54. He's right there. And
it's so interesting because you have Mizorowski at 55 and then Chandler at 74, but even going into next year, I actually have Chandler ahead of Mizorowski, which is a really interesting debate, I think, for us to have, because it's a pretty big gap between these two guys. Look, Mizorowski, obviously, the strikeout rate is incredible. He was dominating at AAA, a 2.27 ERA over 13 games, 80 strikeouts in 63 innings. He had 11 K per nine at the big league level, but a 4 walk per nine. And those walks really killed him at 3.44 ERA over his first 8 games, but then that ERA ballooned to 5.52 over the last 7. So I'm also concerned that Mizorowski is a Tommy John surgery waiting to happen because of the velo, whereas Bubba Chandler, I know, like, we waited a long time for Bubba Chandler. I know it was kind of frustrating at times, and the Pirates are going to be frustrating because run support's not going to be there. I don't know what happened to him in that midsection where we were waiting for him to come up and then he didn't. And I don't know if he was pouting or frustrated or whatever it was, but eventually he did get called to the show. 31 innings, 31 strikeouts, 4 walks. And I think the control for Chandler is a little bit more tantalizing to me over the electric fastball of Mizorowski, but you obviously see things differently here. So I want to get your take on these two.
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel that it's that much bigger, but it is, like, numerically, it's obviously, it's, well, like,
it's a 20 point
20 spot,
20 rank difference. Yeah.
But I will say, like, you're in a bucket, you're kind of in, like, baseball ranks. You start to get into these buckets where it's like, it's a big grouping here. There's positive and negatives on both of these guys. Like, Bubba came out at the major leagues and had a really low walk rate. That wasn't necessarily the minor league thing. Sure. Also, he was only affected by one game, which was the Brewers, ironically. We give up 9 earned runs. Everything else is pretty good. They kind of slowed him into coming in after openers, and then he got a few starts in. I thought there was so much to be positive about. His fastball looked so good at the end of the year, and this is a guy that had evaluation as, like, the number 1 fastball shape in baseball. Mizorowski kind of has similarities, just he was thrust more into that starting role. He can have some walk issues, but he has absolutely electric stuff. This is a risk versus reward thing. I do think there is a path where Bubba Chandler is the more valuable player, but I don't want to be dismissive because I don't think the Brewers anytime soon are going to put Mizorowski in the bullpen or anything like that. I think they're going to have a full long stretch out for him. I think these guys are actually close, though my ranks don't quite have it. I might even make a little bit of adjustment. Right now, it's a little bit more Mizorowski, but I think Bubba Chandler is, like, flying back up the boards after what he was able to do in his major league start.
Andy Pajes at number 70, I love. I got to tell you, this was a player last year going into the year I was very high on. I loved what I saw of him last year in the postseason too. He's an aggressive player. I like that. 272 batting average for him last year. 27 homers, 86 ribbies for him. He also stole 14 bases. He played 156 games, more than I think a lot of people would have expected. Pajes, I think, is a guy that when we get here next year is going to be in that top 50 potentially. Your thoughts?
Yeah, underrated. I think some people already have him in the top 50. Something I'd love to see hitting with the Dodgers. They're one of the best, like, right-handed hitting pull ballparks. That's why Mookie Betts has always really done well. He actually lowered his pull percentage. I'd love to see him do a little bit, and his hard hit rate went down while his launch angle went down. So, like, I want to see the other end. I want to see him pull the ball in the air a little bit more. Regardless of all that, he still hit 27 homers and stole almost 15 bases with a 270 average. Like, underrated is 100%. He's kind of like the Brian Wu, I think, of hitters, where I don't know if people, like, feel where the valuation is of him. I would be trying to buy him for anybody that views him outside the top 100. You could argue that my rank is maybe even, like, still a tiny bit lower, like right at 70. I definitely think he could easily vault himself into the top 50 with a few changes. I just don't know if that's in his ball game, but he's no doubt a top 75 dynasty guy.
All right, next grouping here real quick, 76, to 100. Mason Miller, obviously a guy that, we're looking at with a live arm, but
well, yeah, there's a caveat. The only reason I wanted to put him on here before anything, because I didn't put this as a note for you. The reason I have him here too.
Oh, I think I know.
Oh, yeah. Is that I legitimately think the Padres, pending who the new management is and everything, they might consider stretching him out as a starter.
Agreed.
Even if not, if he's with the Padres and he is the closer, having closers as a top 100 dynasty valuation is kind of tough. But he's this unique unicorn because, like, if he stretches out and it works with that type of fastball, like, he could be a top 50. If you're going to bring top,
plus
Mizorowski is a
guy who qualifies at RP, and you could put him in those mandatory RP spots too.
So he's like a special, unique situation.
No, absolutely, and I'm glad we did touch on him. Kyle Stowers at 84, an interesting one too. It's funny. Jacob Marcy had a nice little year for the Marlins, and Kyle Stowers had a year that I don't think anybody saw coming there. So he is at his 27-year season. 25 homers, 73 RBI, hit 288 with a 912 OPS. I guess the question is, can Stowers repeat those numbers next year?
Well, also, I want to point out, he did that in under 400 at-bats, 399 at-bats, which he put up 25 homers. Can he repeat? Who knows on that level? Can he pace out to be a 35, 40 home run guy? I don't know. But what I like is he had a 52% hard hit rate, which was elite, a 19% barrel rate, which is elite. His expected batting average at 278 supports him hitting at 288. I'd like to see his strikeouts come down, but they came down 8% year over year. So if he drops that again while walking, while hitting the ball hard, yes. Kyle Stowers, another massively underrated. When we're talking about dynasty risers, sometimes they're obvious. Sometimes they're questionable debates of like Konnor Griffin versus Kyle Schwarber. And then sometimes they're players that people just might not be up on. Andy Pajas, maybe. Kyle Stowers, I affirmatively think people just don't conceptualize what his value is. And I think this is a 30-plus home run hitter that you can get near the back end.
Were competitive last year, you know, especially down the stretch. Just ask the Mets.
If you got Marcy and Xavier Edwards hitting in front, by the way, those are guys that are stealing bases, getting on base. There's RBI opportunities.
Yeah, Marcy was a nice little player last year. I picked him up in a couple leagues at the end there. Geraldo Perdomo, also another guy, 87, that I think might be flying under some radars there for the Arizona Diamondbacks. He's going to be 26 years old, coming off a year where he had 20 homers and 100 RBI and sold 27 bases. 290 batting average. Look, here's the thing, Welsh. This is a guy in 98 games the previous season hit 3 home runs. Now he's jumped to 20. So I think a lot of people will go, oh, well, that was interesting. Do you think that will keep people away from him, thinking this is just not something to chase? Or are those people going to miss out on a guy in Perdomo who might have figured out something really new and a different level and benchmark of his productivity?
I think they might miss out. And like, I want to be a buyer on him. This is kind of like in the Pete Crow, but this is different. Geraldo Perdomo was so good all the time that it's like, I could be too low or too high, because this is all based around like, do you believe? Is this going to be, so many guys have that outlier season where it's like they never do it again. Is that for Perdomo? The reason I lean like that it's not is, first off, like the protection around, if you have Cattell and Carroll hitting in front or behind him, it creates incredible run RBI opportunities for him to be able to repeat. 98 runs over 100 RBI is ridiculous. He doesn't strike out. He walks a ton. He gets the ball in the air. He upped his hard hit percentage. Like, there's such a great floor that you could maybe just be like, oh, well, the numbers are just not going to repeat. But he had 27. If he's a 15, 25 guy with close to or 90 plus runs and RBI, like right outside the top 100 makes a ton of sense. And he's a huge supportive player for your batting average. What you dreamed out of Luis Ariz for all the years is what Perdomo is. You always are like, I would always say this, like, why doesn't Ariz hit more homers? Why doesn't he ever steal bases? Well, Perdomo does. And he doesn't strike out. He's a great points league player. I think 87 might be too low, but I think it's the right combination of the risk of him not having a history of doing this stuff and building in some of what he did last season being super valuable.
Speaking of super valuable, how about 37 home runs off the waiver wire? Because that's basically what Joe Adell was last year. Joe Adell, a player who has been enigmatic to say the least, ironically, 26, turning 27. Same age again as Juan Soto, everybody, just for perspective of how great Juan Soto is. I just want to put that out there once again. But the strikeouts are always going to be a problem. The stolen bases kind of disappeared, but the power became monstrous. This is another guy, too, who kind of sneaks into this top 100 here at 89. And I got to be honest with you, I get the reasons why, because he's young enough. We've waited so long. I mean, he's a post type sleeper at this point. So what's your evaluation of Joe Adell in Dynasty now going forward? Can we expect him to come back and hit 30 home runs? And will it be worth it if he ends up hitting 210 or 215?
So I think he is a 30 home run hitter. I think that's just what it is. I mean, you and I had lots of debates in the redraft season this year of Joe Adell, and like, I interviewed Joe Adell multiple years ago, and I loved his take on power, that, he understood his ability to hit for power. He didn't give me some chalky answer. He was like, I know I can hit for power. I know how to tap into it. And I know the spots where I want to do it. It was just everything else in between didn't work. This year it kind of did. He hit 37 homers while hitting only 236. So could it all fall apart? Definitely. He has been streaky, but I think enough years have passed where you're seeing some things that you like. He lowered his K percentage, second lowest of his career. That's a huge key marker here. With the lowered K percentage, yes, the batting average struggled, but he had a 236 average, a 273 expected batting average. So even if you give me 250 with Joe Adell, I'm guaranteeing that's 30 homers. 17% barrel rate, elite. 50% hard hit rate, elite. He didn't even need to pull the ball as much because he's got pure raw power. If he can get that batting average up, which the expected numbers are telling so, he underperformed by 30 batting average points against breaking pitches. He underperformed by 50 batting average points against fastballs. If that comes back up, this is a 30-plus home run hitter who's kind of actually going into the prime of his career. It doesn't feel like it because you said we're in like post hype sleeper for Joe Adell. But I will tell you, there are people that have him easily inside the top 50 because they believe this is another, like, we're building in the risk of Joe Adell falling apart versus who he is. He's a top 100 guy. Some might see him as a top 50.
50, I think, is pushing the envelope. But what do you think? Where do you see Joe Adell and some of these other guys? Drop your comments below. It's great to be talking baseball again. Subscribe to the Fantasy Pros MLB YouTube channel and, of course, the podcast feeds wherever you get your podcast from. And go check out Welsh's Dynasty rankings for MLB up on FantasyPros.com right now. That'll do it for us. But the story of the game goes on for the Welsh. I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.